Hi, this is Ben from SkyFi Audio. Today we've got a overview for you of some components straight out of 1980. This is a Yamaha C-4 preamp, T-2 FM tuner, and an M-2 power amplifier. These units were featured in the Professional Series catalog, and in 1980 this is a set that you could have purchased. The C4 and the M2 were produced from 1979 to 1982, and the T2 tuner had a slightly longer run. This was 78 to 83. Now, one interesting thing about these is the tuner was actually cheaper than the preamp was cheaper than the tuner at release. So the retail price on the C4 in 1980 was $570, and the tuner was $750. And we'll see some evidence of why that might be the case when we spin these around the back and look at the construction. So that leaves the M2. This unit is rated at 240 watts per channel into 8 ohm, and that's at 0.005% THD. So this is very conservatively rated. On the bench test, this did 240 watts, no problem. The little brother to this guy is the M4, which puts out half the power at 120 watts per channel. The smaller one, the M4 retail, was $650, and the M2, $1,200. So it was almost double the price to get into the bigger power amplifier. Now, these units have all undergone what we call a routine service. This is not what we consider a restoration where we go and swap out a bunch of capacitors and stuff. These units were all fundamentally working when they came to us. The M2 was actually recently serviced, 2009. And they really just needed a good cleaning and a touch-up. So these are pretty much in stock condition, with the exception of the lamps. So these all use like a 14-volt incandescent lamp, and they always burn out. It's very rare that you'll find one of these in a used market with all of the backlights on the switches working. So these are actually pretty cool. What happens is, when you depress this switch, it actually activates a backlight. There's a whole structure behind these panels that hold the lamps inside of these sockets. Now, the stock incandescents, they run a little bit hot, so there's been reports that you touch the button, it's like screaming hot. So that's one downside, and then they're kind of hard to replace and get at, especially for an end user. So what we've gone ahead and done on this whole set is converted it to LED. So this is the second Yamaha power amplifier I've done this in. This is the third C4 that I've done this modification on. So on the camera, it looks a little bit blown out, but in person, there's no, you can see this is kind of like bright and cloudy. In person, it's a nice smooth white. It's very hard to capture the way that this LED functions in a real space on a camera. So in person, these things just look stunning, and when it gets darker, it's just a really cool set. One thing I should note on this specific set, at one point, I think one of the filters might have been changed during a relamp. This color and this color are slightly different. They are supposed to be the same. So on this set, you'll notice kind of a gradient from white to teal to green, and then the other green down here is matched to the one on the right. So just know that if you're looking at this particular set, that there is a color variation here. That's not an error in the camera. There is, 3 different color LEDs on this C4. And then on the T2, this one relies on a lot of elements inside that are clear and kind of disperse the light. And when I switched this one to LED, it just really came alive. This tuner looks excellent. So next we're gonna spin these units around and go to the back side and look at the connections and kind of get an idea of what features these might have by looking at the backs. All right, I now have all 3 devices spun around so that we can look at the jacks on the back panel. Let's get started with the M2. So the first thing I noticed when I spun this around was the quality of these input jacks. So they've got this nice flanged, back on them, and it's almost like a thick copper coating similar to the bus bars that are inside of the amplifier itself. There's a ground lug at the bottom. In the manual, this is marked as earth ground. I'm assuming this is just for troubleshooting ground issues. You might want to use this to get all of your units to same ground potential if you're having some sort of hum issue. We've got an AC and DC input, and the explanation on this is actually fairly simple. The AC input there's a capacitor in line before it goes off to the power amplifier circuitry. It just means that there's a little bit of filtering on the frequencies that can come through, and it's for DC protection. The service manual recommends that you use the AC input in normal circumstances, but for somebody that wants to get the most out of the amplifier, the DC input technically has a wider frequency response. You just have to make sure that your preamp isn't dumping DC or something onto this, because it could get through to the speakers. So if you want to play it safe, use the AC. If you're comfortable with your equipment, go ahead and use the DC input, and you might notice a difference in sound. For the level adjustments here on the back, in most cases you want to just have these cranked to 10 so that they're as close to out of circuit as possible, but there might be a certain situation where you want to trim one channel back against the other, or you want to, say, reduce the overall level coming into this power amplifier if you have a really hot preamp or something. So for right now I'm going to leave these cranked to 10. And then binding posts. So these were designed for bare wire, nothing else. You can see that there's a little metal plate in here, but it's not really enough to take advantage of a full-size spade. So if you're going to be using this thing with these stock terminals, I recommend you get a connector similar to this. This is called like a push pin connector, and this can end up making really good contact inside of here and allows you to kind of go with a more high-end cabling solution if you're interested. The other alternative that I'd offer for this is doing a mini spade. So that would be something like this, and if we stick this in, we can see that this is still going to be able to make contact with that metal surface in there. So again, bare wire or mini spade is what I'd recommend for this stock connector. There are some people that have modded these with 5-way binding posts, but I would say keep this thing classic and adapt your cabling to the amp rather than the other way around. Now, the most important thing to notice on this is this marking here, A or B, 8 to 16 ohms. A plus B, 16 ohm. What this means is that this amp is not 4 ohm stable. It does not like to see a load less than 8 ohms. So in most cases, you're not going to have two sets of 16 ohm speakers. It's just not a combination that comes up very often. So what I would recommend is run this with only one set of speakers that's 8 ohm or higher, or if you do have two speakers connected that are around 8 ohm, do not run them at the same time. That's going to present a load to this amplifier that it's not going to like, and it could cause damage to it. So that's probably the most important note on this one. The outlet on the back is unswitched, so as long as this cord is plugged in, that outlet is on. Has a 100 watt maximum. And then one of the other cool things about this is this has handles on the back, and you can actually use this for wire management. So the cable can get wrapped around like this. So this thing's actually really easy to move around and work on. You could store it something like that. All right, let's move on to the preamp. So remember when I said that this preamp costs less than the tuner? If we look at the jacks, you can see that they're obviously different. So the jack type is slightly different, and I don't know if that was just because they needed to get more jacks on here, or if they cheaped out a little bit and went with a slightly different jack configuration. They did do like a gold plating on the phono inputs. Everything else is just normal. So we have a combination of switched and unswitched outlets. Do not use this for the power amplifier. Actually, in the M2 manual, it says do not do that. It's a high current amp. Don't put it in a switched outlet on another component. So this is more like what I use this for. Sometimes I'll put a charger on if I'm running a like an iPhone with a headphone output for testing. I'll use that to charge up devices. You could use that to switch on the tuner if you wanted. Phono inputs are pretty much self-explanatory. 1 and 2 are moving magnet, 3 is moving coil. We have 2 line level inputs, provision for 2 tape decks, and pre-out. So just keep in mind with this preamp, you have independent control of your preamp outputs. So you could technically run 2 rigs on this. You could run set 1 to one amplifier and set 2 to another amplifier, and you could actually use the preamp to toggle between 2 sets of speakers with relay switching, which is really nice. The other thing that you could do potentially with this is run 1 out to a subwoofer that has a line level input, or you could do bi-amping with that. On to the tuner. So on the T2, we have a ground similar to the one on the M2. We have a provision for an F connector. Let me grab a few connectors so that we can look at the various antenna connections here. So this is designed for an F connector, which looks like this. This is like a standard connector that you would have from your cable company. And when you put a piece of coax in, you'll get a center pin. So this is for running a piece of coax up to your roof and then connecting like that. This is basically another connection like this, just a different method. And the way that this is meant to be used is you get a piece of coax and you peel back the braid, and then the braid inserts inside of the little metal clip down here, and then the center conductor goes on and gets tied into this connector. So this is just two different ways that you can hook up an external antenna. And then the 300 ohm balanced is for like a basic T-style antenna. This is rare on a tuner. This has a fixed and a variable output. So coming out of the fixed, your full signal coming out, this is for feeding into a preamp or something like that. Variable, this would be for connecting this maybe to a tape deck and you're fine tuning your volume. Or if you didn't have a preamp, you could technically run this straight to a power amplifier. I don't recommend that in this case because of the location of the volume control on this unit. It just makes it a little bit clumsy to use. So we'll see that when we look at the front of this unit. And then the final thing is this multipath output. And this is for connecting to an oscilloscope to analyze your multipath for antenna placement. And I'll give a demonstration of that in a little bit. All right, so that's the rear panel. Next, we'll take a detailed look at the front of each one of these components and look at some of the features. Okay, taking a closer look at this M2, the first thing I want to point out is the beautiful construction of this piece. There's no screws on the top of the chassis. This whole panel wraps around the front and is inset in between the heat sinks, and all the screws come in from the sides. So this is just a really neat way to build a unit, and it really catches the eye. Now with this piece, it does idle kind of cool. Like right now the heat sinks are barely warm, but I still would never recommend stacking on top of this. And there's two reasons. Heat obviously is one, you want to give this thing room to breathe. And the second is you don't want to put feet in here and have them depressing down on this metal sheet. So if you'd set up a set like this, I'd recommend either putting them in an equipment rack or putting them side by side. So if we look at the front panel, we have the indication lamps in the front. I'm gonna go ahead and power this down. When we first power this up, after a short power on delay, we're gonna hear some relay clicks, and then speaker A and B are going to engage. The backlight means that that speaker set is active. So if I just wanted to listen to my A speakers, I would do that. This is both together. And then the final thing that we've got on the front panel here is the peak output level indicator. And these are actually very accurate. Part of the alignment I did on this was tuning this up, and it's really nice, and they track together really well. I'm just turning this up so that we can see some more action in the meters. That's the M2. All right, looking at the front panel of the C4, the first thing that you'll notice is that the faceplate is a slightly different color than the tuner below it. And this is just a byproduct of age and manufacturing process. So with these black anodized faceplates over time, they can turn to this purplish hue. And at almost 40 years old, this can be expected to a certain degree. Next thing I want to go over is the lights. So the way that Yamaha designed these backlights was actually really clever. When it's in the nominal operating mode, all lights are on. So power is obviously going to illuminate when the unit is powered on. This light is only illuminated if the tone circuit is actually bypassed. So if I do this, now tone is engaged and these controls are going to take effect. If I do this, it bypasses the tone control section. And then same thing for the audio muting. When it's disengaged, you're at negative 20 dB. And when it's lit, muting is off and it's operating normally. All right, so let's just review the front panel controls. This unit has a built-in headphone amplifier, an independent headphone amp circuit, and this control can get a little bit confusing, so I wanted to go over it a little bit. So it's not so much an independent level control for headphones as it is a trim. So if I have this cranked up, but my volume is at 0, I'm not going to get anything. But if I have audio, I can trim this down or up. I think the reason they did this was to allow you to be able to listen to headphones at the same time you have audio output to a power amplifier and speakers somewhere else. So for example, if you had a set of speakers in the kitchen and you're listening at a specific level that you've set here, you can sit down, plug in your headphones, and trim the level to be comfortable for your ears here. So I hope that makes sense. Next up is the tone section, which is super simple. You just pick the frequency that you want it to roll over or cut off at, and then you adjust the boost or cut of that frequency point with the controls here. And while I'm on the subject, metal, 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 metal. A lot of the controls here are really high quality, solid metal pieces. These are all set in with set screws. And then these guys, let's take one off quick. Yeah, this is a plastic control. But for the most part, we're all metal for the main controls in this unit, which is really nice. It gives it a really nice feel, especially on these rectangular switches. This is like Yamaha classic right here, and I love using these controls. All right, so continuing on, filter section is pretty much self-explanatory. You just have a different cutoffs that you can, looks like 15 hertz and 10 hertz that you can just engage or disengage that frequency cutoff. Stereo, reverse, and mono modes are available. You can select your record out for your tape outputs, and you can also copy from deck to deck, which is kind of nice. Input control. We have 4 auxiliary inputs or 4 line level inputs, aux, tuner, and then either of your tape deck inputs. When we go to phono, that shifts us over to this control, which gives us the selection between 3 different turntables. 1 and 2 are optimized for moving magnet and are loadable here. You can't load them independently, you just pick a setting for both. And then the MC setting has no additional settings. So we just hop over to MC, and you'd be using your moving coil cartridge in that position. So you can technically hook 3 turntables up to this unit simultaneously and switch between them. So this is a really nice turntable for vinyl junkies, and it actually sounds really good. I'm running it right now with a Shure 97 cartridge on a Technics SL 1210 Mark II, and it's just a really nice combo. Volume control is self-explanatory. Really nice smooth action on this. The volume control in this is actually like 4 inches deep. It's a really, really nice high quality control. Simple balance control with a center detent. So you can hear it click in there in the center. And then this is probably the best thing about this preamp is your relay switched outputs. So this has 2 outputs that you can independently engage and disengage here. And this is done via relay, which is really nice. So when you power this unit up, there's probably about a 3 or 4 second power on delay to allow the unit to stabilize before it engages its audio to an amplifier. And likewise, when you turn it off, it immediately disengages those relays. So what that translates to is a little bit more safety. You can technically power this preamp down while it's connected to a power amplifier, and you're not going to get any transient clicks or anything. Same thing at power up due to that delay circuit. I'd still recommend powering down in the normal order. Power up your preamp first, then your power amp, and then do the reverse on power down. Power down your amp, wait a little bit, and then turn off your pre. Other things for the C-4. This gets extremely hot. So right now this has been idling for probably 35-45 minutes, and it's just warm here, but this will start to cook right above this area. And you'll also notice the volume control getting hot. This is just a byproduct of the design. This unit is a little bit different than most preamps because it's constructed almost upside down. Underneath this metal plate is a collection of 3 large PCBs, and each one of those has many, many solder joints. And what happens is the heat generated by this unit kind of all floats upwards and actually compromises the solder joint. So if you're looking at one of these in the used market, ask the person that's selling it, have the solder joints been reflowed on the main boards? That's an important question. It's considered routine maintenance on this piece, and I have gone ahead and done that on this one. So this one has got the reflow done, all the controls cleaned, the adjustments were all done on the inside per service manual spec. So this one again is in stock condition as far as parts go, but it has been fully serviced. All right, I've got the setup slightly rearranged for demonstrating this tuner, and it actually looks really slick to have the tuner on top of the preamp like that. Only problem is that the heat generated by the C2 has me a little bit worried. You can see that this is tilted up at a slight angle. One of the cool features of this tuner is it has these little tilting feet. So you can either run it flat or you can tilt it up a little bit. And the reason they do that is because the variable output control is located underneath here. So let me turn this on. There's a center detent, I guess for optimal level, and then we can boost from there. So you notice when I have it all the way down, you can still hear the sound. So it's not recommended to hook this up directly to a power amplifier. You can do it, but if you needed to get to the tuner fast or readjust it, you're going to be in trouble. So let's do a review of the front panel here. So this, again, I did the LED conversion on this, so the meters are all really clear and bright. Looks really nice. So let's swing through what each one of these buttons does, and then we'll do a little bit of a demonstration up here with the scope and see how that turns out. So when you depress this button, it puts a test tone through the speaker. And what this is for is it allows you to tune in the optimal level for recording. So if you had a radio broadcast at a certain time that you were really excited to record on your tape deck, you would press that button, get your levels all set, everything optimal, and then when it came time to record, you wouldn't have to mess with your level settings. Auto versus blend. This is related to stereo separation. So I'm gonna see if my camera is able to pick up this slight change here. Yeah, it's very hard to see. As I'm toggling in, the stereo indicator is getting slightly dim. What this means is when you have it in auto mode, it's doing a blend to reduce noise. It reduces noise at the sacrifice of stereo separation. So if you want, you can bypass it. If you take the blend mode to off, it gives you maximum stereo separation, but you may get some background noise. Mode, auto stereo versus mono. All this does is it allows you to force a station to mono. So I'm receiving a stereo broadcast right now. If I push this button, it's going to kick it back to mono. And when in auto mode, if stereo is available, it's going to lock onto that signal. Mute OTS. Skip mode. Nope. Mute and OTS. So what this does is if I go off station here into a dead zone, it's going to give me nothing. I don't have any audio output. But if I engage this, it allows me to go through without any muting between stations. So that's valuable for going into distant stations and trying to fine tune to something that this isn't going to automatically pick up. And then OTS just refers to optimal tuning system. And what that does is if you're slightly off station, it's going to pick up, let's see, it'll pick up the station and then slowly grab the tuning dial and move it towards center. So that's just a feature that helps assist, because this is an analog tuner and you could be a little bit off, and it does this through capacitive touch. So whenever you release the tuning knob, it analyzes and sees if it can correct the station. Let's bring it back here. All right. So auto DX versus local. This basically just allows you to force vocal reception or allow it to automatically detect distant stations. DX is just a abbreviation for distant from back in the old telegraph days. And then the final selector is high sensitivity or high selectivity. So the normal operating mode is all of these switches backed off. So by default, it's in high sensitivity mode, picking up as many stations as possible, but you can use this high selectivity switch to help if you have two stations that are adjacent that are interfering with one another. You can get kind of a tighter pickup and try to isolate that station. So this is a really nice fully featured tuner, but very simple to operate if you just leave it in this, this position here. So the final thing to look at is multipath. All right, I'm gonna try to keep this multipath demonstration really simple because this is a digital oscilloscope. It's having a little bit of trouble with the waveform. This is easier to see on an analog scope. So I'm just gonna show you that the image changes as you adjust the station, and then manipulating the antenna, you can get different images on the scope. So let's get some audio playing. So as I move through the tuning dial, you'll see the shape of this waveform kind of shifts as I move around different stations. So I'm going to take it back to that station that we started on. Now, let's see if we can get this dialed in. All right. And then right now I've got just an antenna wire in my hand. And as I move this around, we see the waveform reacting to the position of the antenna. So I guess the idea is that you'd send somebody up by the antenna and have them move it around while somebody else monitors a scope on the stations that they really want, and come up with some sort of optimum placement. So that's it. That's the T2 tuner demonstration. Again, this is Ben with SkyFi Audio. I hope you enjoyed our presentation today on this beautiful 1980s Yamaha equipment. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. You can also visit our website, skyfiaudio.com, SKYFI audio.com, to take a look at our current inventory of vintage and modern hi-fi equipment for sale. See you next time.